Welcome to all. Thank you very much for joining us, both online and here in the room, for this side event, Rising to the Challenge, Scaling Up Climate Action in Displacement Setting. As many of you know, nearly half of refugees globally are hosted in a highly climate vulnerable environment, where they are exposed to climate-related risks and lack the necessary resources and support to adapt and remain resilient in the face of escalating climate impacts. Many hosting countries are already facing significant challenges in adapting, preparing for, and addressing climate change impact. And the Global Refugee Forum, following the COP28 this year, provide definitely an important opportunity to build momentum as multiple stakeholders are mobilizing to protect the most vulnerable and scale up climate action in displacement setting, including refugees, other forcibly displaced people, and their hosting communities. So the objective of this session will be to first hear from the co-leadership of the Global Refugee Forum Climate Action Multi-Stakeholders Pledge, and from a multi-stakeholder representative contributing to the realization of its transformative vision to strengthen the protection, preparedness, and resilience of refugees, other forcibly displaced people, and their host. And we will, of course, learn about partnerships, good practices, and regional approaches that are already strengthening the inclusion of refugees and other forcibly displaced people and their hosting communities. So we will have two very interesting discussions today, and I would like to already extend a warm welcome to the co-leadership of the Climate Action Multi-Stakeholder Pledge joining us today. That will be the first panel. Then following the two panel, I will hand over to my colleague Andrew Harper, the Special Advisor on Climate Action, to open the floor for intervention from multi-stakeholders representatives who are contributing to the pledge. But to set the scene for our first panel, I would like to start by introducing a short scene set video featuring refugees and internally displaced people who are taking climate action in their local communities.
Can we run from it? Swim against the tide? Fly to safer ground?
How do you flee climate change when it fans the flames of war and tensions rise as water and food become harder to find?
How do you flee climate change? Do you ever know when it's time to grab your bags or what exactly you're running from?
How do you flee climate change when you've already had to flee conflict, violence,
Persecution.
And your new home is now on a floodplain?
or parched earth?
How can we flee climate change?
When your house has already been lost to the storms?
Or burned in wildfires?
And your crops continue to fail season
After season?
After season,
How will we flee climate change when our governments are unprepared to respond?
Or those around us choose to deny the harsh reality?
We can't flee climate change.
So we are rising to the challenge.
we are raising our voices.
And we are working with communities to find solutions.
The climate crisis impacts us all.
But not equally.
So let's work together.
So those who are most vulnerable are not paying the highest price.
Thank you very much. No, I think this video shows very clearly what the challenges are and what the work ahead is. I'm very pleased to introduce refugee representative Joël Hangi, who is the inclusivity lead at the Global Platform for Action, for her keynote address, which will link the COP28 and the GRF Climate Action Multi-Stakeholder Pledge. Joël Hangi, please join me.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to take this opportunity and talk about, of course, the video that you have seen. It's a reality. Just to introduce myself, of course, again, my name is Joël Hangi, originally from DRC Congo, and I've been based in Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya for more than a decade. And currently I'm working at the Global Platform for Action on Sustainable Energy in Displacement Settings, the GPA, as the inclusivity lead. Most time when I meet people and talk to people, they always ask me, why do you care so much about climate and energy access in displaced settings? And it's a moment that I enjoy the most because it gives me an opportunity to share what it means for millions of people to have access to clean energy, which is so much connected to climate change. Myself, living in Kakuma refugee camp, have experienced a lot of challenges. And of course, challenges means, becoming stronger. The limitation that I've seen from not having access to clean energy for both, cooking and lighting, but also the limitation to grab opportunities online, as we know all that, the online world is now driving and everyone is currently working from online. For displaced person, it's not really a reality because most often you'll find that no access to electricity, for example, is something that is limiting them to access more opportunities, like work opportunity, as well as studies. And I've seen a lot of my fellow refugees passing their dreams to the next generation because they have to cater for the young one and making sure that they can see the next day. It's so sad because life in Kakuma refugee camp or in all other camps is not really easy. Speaking of climate change, honestly speaking, climate change is affecting millions of people, especially in camp settings. In a matter of seconds or hours, of course, you will see your effort, all the things that you have been working for many years vanishing because, yes, heavy rains, extreme weather is really affecting the life of many. And as an insider and an outsider now working in the humanitarian sector to support my fellow refugees, I came to realize that it's really important for stakeholders to come together in order to address the challenge when it comes to climate change. For so many years, people have been working independently, but of course we have seen that this is something that is not working, and it's only coming together that will make us stronger. A flashback back to 2019 at the first Global Refugee Forum, which I was so privileged again to be part of. It was a moment that brought again hope in the lives of refugees and many displaced people by seeing a lot of pledge and commitment coming from different people. Of course, the pledge cut across different areas, including policy, shelter, livelihood, health, and energy. But the increased number of displacements as of recent years is telling us that we need to do more. And I'm so pleased to see a lot of people again coming together this year, today, because they understand that there are more that is still needed, and what is still needed is here, and we can do it together. Last week at COP, I was there, and I was so pleased to see that people are moving towards ensuring that displaced people are also part of the conversation, but moreover, seeing the language being translated into more inclusive approach, and having the name of refugees as part of these big documents and agreements is something that is so encouraging, and it gives us all hope that we can do this. It's a fight, we keep on pushing on a daily basis, and we can do it, of course. And just to emphasize on one thing that really captured my attention during COP is the Loss and Damage Fund. This fund is coming. Of course, we have to walk the talk, but at the same time, we have to be prepared in terms of how to ensure that this fund is reaching the most affected people, including refugees. And on top of that, it's not just a matter of, again, the thing that has been happening, developing something outside the camp, developing something where refugees don't have access, making sure that this time refugees are part of this conversation. Refugees, they do have important inputs, they do have skills, and they can do it. It's really important to ensure that they are included in all steps, including policy, implementation, evaluation, and of course, together we can do this. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very, very much, Joël. Your message is very, very clear. First, you spoke of the specific situation of what refugees living in camps, and there are quite a number of refugees around the world living in situation of camp, and you said how living in a camp as a result of the effect of climate action, either a drought or floods, you find yourself in a situation where you lose everything, and that I think you described it very, very well. The importance, and you said it, that we all come together, whether it is during the COP or during the GRF, this coming together that you stressed about is also essential. The fact that this COP displacement was on the topic, and that is also, I think, a result of the fact that Director General of the COP28 came to Dadaab, came to a refugee camp for probably the first time that it happened, to really understand what being a refugee and what living in certain context meant. And you also made reference to the Loss and Damage Fund and the fact that refugees have to be part of the conversation. The fact that you were the keynote speaker and launched that conversation, I think, is a strong testimony to the importance of refugees being at the center of the conversation. So thank you very much to you, Joël. I think we can start now the first panel, Co-Leadership Transformative Vision for the Climate Action Multi-Stakeholder Pledge. We will now start the first panel with Safia Mohammed, who's the Commissioner, National Commission for Refugees and IDPs in Somalia, Mr. Efa Muleta, who is the State Secretary for Agriculture, Government of Ethiopia, Ambassador Deike Podzel, General Director and Special Envoy for Middle East Humanitarian Issues, so the Government of Germany, and Ms. Lotte Manchon, State Secretary for Development Policy, the Government of Denmark. So thanks to all of you for being on this panel. I will start with you, Ms. Safia Mohammed. Somalia, and we unfortunately know that Somalia has witnessed devastating climate extreme this year, whether it is flood, whether it is drought. If you could describe the current situation in Somalia, the challenges that you face in responding to the urgent needs of the people to flee their home, and at the same time their need to build climate resilience. How do you see your role as one of the co-leaders of the Climate Action Multi-Stakeholder Pledge? Over to you.
Hello. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, moderator, Brother Raouf, and panels. I say hello to you. The clip that I just watched, we all watched, is pretty much the water we have seen. Those are the people that I left behind and waiting for me to get a response. And water, and my eyes, as a commissioner of refugees in Somalia, watched a mother who electricity fall into the water, and the child that died in front of her because of water that take. Somalia is a home for 3 million for displaced, large number of displacement in East Africa. We're the fourth in Africa to hold the number of ITPs that is displaced in Somalia. The testament of Somalia is we have an open door to policy that some refugees can move around and go around. The current situation in Somalia is a dire need, devastating floods. The floods have blocked the ways, the roads to deliver food. The government, state and federal, are really reaching out, but it's not enough sufficient support. There's a need to long-term plan for recovery and permanent prevention of climate. The crop lives and mechanism is what we need, especially displaced people. The climate change creates a new norm in Somalia, the country with the arid and semi-arid landscape, water scarce, and food insurance. More climate seasons are approaching. Now we're going to the right El Niños, and drought is approaching. Somalia is the second most climate vulnerable country in the world. One at least is not ready to face another one. The Global Climate Index report that. I work in a country that severely affected both climate change and conflict. Host community faces many challenges, and displaced populations are often neglected. The institution for a child couple adds up a problem to that. And bureaucracy nature of the climate funds is also a problem hindering effective of the taking care of the situation. And our work to build resilient affected community, we are met with repeated unexpected crises. They happen to quickly, severely, with little to no time for any meaningful recovery to build a resilient and adaptation capacity of local community. So that's all I can say.
No, thank you very, very much, Commissioner. We'll come back on some of the points that you've made. I'll now move to Mr. Efa Muleta, as I said, State Minister for Agriculture in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is another country hosting country which is witnessing the devastating effect of climate change on refugees and host communities. Minister, could you describe how escalating climate impacts are affecting the lives and livelihoods of refugees and their hosting communities in Ethiopia, and how do you see your role as a co-leader of the Climate Action Multi-Stakeholder Pledge?
Sure, thank you, dear moderator. Thank you, speakers, excellencies, dear participants, dear panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to me here to present our climate action interventions for Ethiopia. So thank you for your inquiry on the climate impact in Ethiopia and its related effects of livelihoods and refugees and also their hosting communities. Furthermore, let me begin with the climate impacts in detail. So as you know, Ethiopia is a country located in the Horn of Africa, is vulnerable to various climate impacts. The nation experiences a range of environmental challenges, including droughts, floods, desertifications, and erratic rainfall patterns. So these climates have significant implications for both local population and the refugees and also the communities residing in the country. So to go with in detail for these implications for the three main attributes of the climate change. So the drought is particularly just susceptible to current drought, which lead to water scarcity, crop failures, and livestock losses. To see this linked with just food insecurity is a cause for drought, the cause for food malnutrition, hungers, and related health issues. So regarding the floods, in addition to this drought, Ethiopia experiences episodic floods, primarily during the rainy seasons also. These events can cause extensive damage to infrastructures, including housing, schools, healthcare facilities, and also roads. So, related to the desertifications, we are now facing, particularly in the arid and the semi-arid regions of our country. So, the expansion of desert areas adversely affecting the livelihood of our refugees and also the host, linked also to the decreasing the productivity of the land. So the food security in this area is just more of in a problematic situation. So the government of Ethiopia is just committed to the climate actions to address just for the addressing of those environmental impacts by planting 1 million seedlings of multi-purpose plants, executing environmental rehabilitation activities. Here, since we have as a nation, we are very experienced from the Green Legacy Initiative of our Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed Ali, starting from 2019, planted a multi-purpose plant to present, reaching above 30 billion seedlings for the past 5 years, which affects to 17.5% of forest coverage from it is 4%. So upgrading this, we hope to plant this, what I've mentioned, 100 millions of different plants in 4 years, which covers 40,000 hectares. So to realize this policy pledge effectively, collaborations and support from multi-stakeholders are crucial. So we need support for the international communities and the potential donors on the following main points. One is the financial support. Second is technical expertise and the capacity building. When to just have this, some training, capacity building, experience sharing regarding these environment issues. The other is just when to develop a robust partnership. So the other point which we need from our donors or international community is the data and information sharing for the early warning and also for monitoring, analysis, and assist the government of Ethiopia in developing informed policies and programs that are addressing the specific climate challenge faced by refugees and the hosting communities. And we are also just include refugees and hosts in our long-term and low-emission climate resilient development strategy, which goes for 30 years, from 2020 to 2050. It's a broad strategy. So hence, on this special event, the government of Ethiopia calls for support to any potential multi-stakeholders and the development actors in order to combat those linked devastating effects of climate change on our refugees and hosts in Ethiopia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you for your focus on the economic impact of climate change and how climate change is actually affecting the agricultural capacity of the country. Your call for expertise is very, very clear. I'll now move to Ambassador Potzel. Germany is leading the way when it comes to innovative initiatives like the Global Shield to help protect vulnerable people and countries against climate-related risk resulting from extreme weather events such as floods and drought. So how do you see your role, Ambassador Potzel, as a co-leader of the Climate Action Multi-Stakeholder Pledge?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for convening this important panel. And I also would like to, first of all, thank our colleagues from Ethiopia and Somalia for their active engagement and contribution here. It is, I think, extremely important that we come together and hear from you who are so heavily impacted by the effects of climate change. It's a fact that refugee and displacement situations have been very severely impacted by climate change. UNHCR estimates that 90% of refugees originate from countries that are highly vulnerable to climate change, 90%. In the Horn of Africa, people are displaced due to conflict and climate-related disasters, and refugee camps and host communities themselves are often located in very climate vulnerable locations. The majority of refugees are hosted in low and middle income countries, and they themselves are facing great risks from climate change, extreme temperatures, droughts, floods. We saw the pictures just now, with limited resources to cope and adapt. And this is why we want to accelerate action, and our message is simple. We want to make sure that climate policy and climate action respond to the needs of refugees and other displaced people. We want to provide adequate support to their host countries and communities so that they can adapt to the impacts of climate change. We want to implement solutions that integrate actions along the HDP nexus, and there has been a lot on the HDP nexus here during the forum, which is great, because we need to link humanitarian responses, development actors, and peace-building measures at the same time, because we want to make concrete progress on these points. Germany is very proudly taking the co-lead on climate action at this year's GRF in partnerships with Denmark, Ethiopia, Somalia, and the World Bank, of course. And this is the first step, and together we will work determinedly over the next 4 years, inter alia through the formation of a group of friends. We want to address the double vulnerability and identify where climate policy and concrete programs can be adapted to meet the specific needs in refugee situations. And we can share some concrete examples later on if you like. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Ambassador. We'll now go to State Secretary Lotte Marchand. State Secretary, Denmark is another leader in global climate action. What step do donor, governments, and international community need to take to ensure that the climate action is inclusive and reaches displaced and conflict and fragility affected population, as well as their hosting community?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you especially to colleagues from Somalia and Ethiopia, two countries that we work very closely with when it comes to addressing climate change, and the same goes to my German colleague. It's great to be here. As we all know, no one is in doubt. Climate challenges is impacting every country across the world. You cannot swim, you cannot fly away from it, as we saw so vividly in the small film. And we need to address it across all our policies and all our engagement, and do it in co-creation with local partners and also new partners, and not least also make displaced people part of the conversation and the solution. And as Ms. Hangi also reminded us very strongly in her intervention today. So climate change, climate action is an absolute top priority for Denmark, and as it is of integrating climate across humanitarian and development action. It has been a key message of us during the COP28 that also was mentioned here. And we were actually, Denmark, we have been pushing extremely hard for every result on loss and damage, which we see as really an embodiment of this nexus, and was indeed one of the first countries to pledge concrete support for this loss and damage agenda already in 2022. So we are very pleased that the fund is now a reality, and we need to make it come out into the real world. So as an example, we've put aside 35% of our development assistance to green efforts and climate actions in 24, and 60% of that is targeted at vulnerable communities for adaptation and resilient building. That's around 90 million USD. So I think one of the things that really sort of is encouraging is the work that we now see on the inclusion of displaced population in host countries' national climate plans. That is really a key step in ensuring that climate action works for those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And as a shareholder and board member, as a donor Denmark, we need, together with others, press for this in the IFIs, not least in the World Bank and the MDBs, so that we ensure that displacement affected countries can address this, access the support needed to include refugees in their climate and development responses. And that also goes for the climate funds that the commissioner from Somalia were talking about, that it's too difficult to access and get the funds there, and it's something that we're working hard on. Let me just share two concrete pledges on how we will strengthen our efforts. And one is that from 24, the Danish government plans to allocate 40 million USD annually to climate-sensitive nexus programs in fragile contexts, including displacement situations. And secondly, allocating 13 million USD to address climate-related displacement and enhance resilience and anticipatory action in the Horn of Africa, not least Ethiopia and Somalia. No doubt that we all need to do more. Denmark will do our part to help and push for the mobilization of climate funding for the most vulnerable, including new and innovative ways of working with partners, not least the private sector. And we have, during the forum, launched a new initiative where we work with 3 Danish foundations on also, not least, it's both finances, but it's also expertise and technical advice that you were asking for, Mr. State Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. Maybe before I give the floor to Mrs. Maria Dimitriou, from Special Representative of the World Bank to the UN, I'll just make reference to, I would say, 9 of the points that were made by our panel. First, I think it started with the commissioner from Somalia. New normal, having to adapt. I think that was a strong point that was made. The fact that countries, and Somalia in particular, one of the most fragile countries, a number of countries which have either a large number of internally displaced persons or are receiving a large number of refugees, are particularly exposed. So it is important to underline that. The point that were made by Ethiopia on the economic impact, especially in agriculture, of climate change, and that needing to be taken into consideration. And the fact that refugees need to be integrated and included, and that's definitely what Ethiopia is doing in its policy. Germany, thank you for the need, the fact that you stressed on the need to accelerate action, and the reference that you made to the HDP nexus, and Denmark, good that you hear from you, top priority, and the very specific financial commitments that you are making to the issues of climate action. So thank you. I'll give the floor to Mrs. Maria Dimitriou, and then we'll move to the second panel. Maria.
Thank you very much, Assistant High Commissioner, dear Raouf. It's a pleasure to join you all today. As all speakers already highlighted, countries affected by fragility, conflict, and violence are at the front line of climate crisis. Along with the remarks of our colleagues from Germany, 15 out of the 25 countries that are rated as most vulnerable to climate change are also appearing on the World Bank's list of fragile and conflict-affected situations. And refugees and other forcibly displaced people are particularly vulnerable to climate-related impacts. It is encouraging to see that the priorities raised by the pledge are in line with the Relief, Recovery and Peace Declaration that was recently launched at COP28 and endorsed by over 80 states and parties, including the World Bank. Ensuring that refugees and IDPs are included in national adaptation plans, policies and laws, as already highlighted, but let me repeat that, is critical and will serve as a catalyst for ensuring that the unique needs and priorities of displaced populations are at the heart of climate action and programming. It is important to scale up access to climate finance. We all agree in fragile and conflict-affected settings, leveraging available financial instruments and funds. Let me tell you a little bit what we do in the bank. Supporting countries affected by fragility, conflict, and violence is key to achieve the World Bank vision of creating a world free of poverty on a livable planet. As the leading provider of funds helping low-income countries to adapt to climate change, the World Bank has rapidly scaled up spending in FCV-affected situations in recent years from 200 million in 2016 to 1.9 billion, a nine-fold increase in just 5 years. The World Bank prioritizes adaptation in FCV-affected settings. It was highlighted several times. Of the 17 countries that have benefited from the IDA window for host communities and refugees and its predecessor, the World Bank committed over 11.7 billion US dollars in adaptation finance between 2019 and 2023. We are also working to prioritize the needs of FCV-affected communities in planning and core analytics. This includes promoting FCV-sensitive climate action in our country climate and development reports to ensure that climate interventions are tailored to the unique needs and challenges facing refugees and host communities, as Joel also highlighted. Finally, as part of our new playbook, we are preparing a number of global challenge programs which will support replicable and scalable programs across countries and will, among others, help fragile and conflict-affected situations to address the interconnected challenges of climate change and conflict. In all that, partnerships are key. So we look forward to continue working together to scale and accelerate climate action and finance in fragile and conflict-affected countries and in refugee hosting countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. We're running a bit out of time, but I'll still go back to the panel for any additional comment that you may have. I'll start with State Secretary, then Ambassador Potzel, then Minister Mweta, and then the Commissioner. So, State Secretary.
Sorry. No, I mean, thank you so much. It's, I think it's been a great, great discussion that we've had, and honestly, not much to add besides that we will, just to say that Denmark will really commit to get this pledge out and alive. We think it's absolutely a key platform to mobilize support, and are happy to. And what we'll do, we'll try to sort of coordinate messaging in international forums, settings, partnerships, to make sure that it actually does make a difference on the ground. As it was said, we can do it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deke.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I think, first of all, it is really important to bring the different stakeholders together, and this here is an important start, of course. Secondly, I think we also encourage host countries to increase the inclusiveness of their climate action laws, policies, and plans. And our Danish colleague already also mentioned national adaptation plans. For us, it is also very important that they also focus on the refugee population and also should propose concrete measures, and we stand ready to support this. We also feel that, of course, we will work towards improving access to climate action and financing for the respective countries, something that was mentioned here as well. And as I said, I'd love to give you concrete examples of larger climate instruments that we are pushing, and it was already talked about the COP28 in Dubai, and we have operationalized the new fund responding to loss and damage, which was extremely close to our heart, and it also refers now to climate-related displacement, relocation, and migration, something that is very important, and we will follow the further development of the fund, and will do our best to ensure that it will be indeed inclusive also for refugees, displaced people, and vulnerable migrants. And as I said, HDP is extremely important to us, and also Denmark already alluded to anticipatory humanitarian action, and this is indeed a priority for Germany. This year we are spending at least 5% of our annual humanitarian budget for anticipatory action, and I hope that we can increase this number in the coming years, and I invite everybody to follow that path. And let me also just mention that to accelerate meaningful participation and leadership of women we initiated the Women and Climate Security Funding Initiative with the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund by providing 3 million euros and hope that more contributors will join us. So these are some concrete examples, and happy to get as many sort of people on board and countries on board to join us in this very important work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Minister Muleta?
Okay. Sure, thank you very much, dear moderator. And I would like to extend our thanks to both our supporting countries, Denmark and Germany, for their pledge and long time. We have been just working with them and also others on this event. We were to thank. So really, we are very much eager to include our refugees and IDPs to our legal frameworks and the policies, especially in the climate smart agriculture roadmap, and also in the green legacy initiatives. And the other point is just it is a long-term strategy, which is known as long-term, low emission climate resilient development strategy, in which the issues of refugees will be addressed in it for both NAP, National Adaptation Program, and also the emissions, how to use the technologies for energy saving. So we'll consider this, and also we will play our leadership exercise to coordinate, collaborate within and out of our supporting donors with also. We'll also want to just emphasize with the CADIP, the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. All these things are the policy framework. We'll just revise and work with refugees and also our host communities. Really, I thank you very much for the support and all things you have been just showing. And thank you very much, really.
Thank you very much, Minister Muleta. Commissioner Mohammed?
Thank you, Raouf. Hello. I want to thank World Bank and Germany and Denmark for the support. Also, other partners. The crisis of a climate is an all-world crisis. It's really a huge effort that we all need to stand. And Somalia faces a continuity. As a government, we are committed to climate action multi-pledges. The multi-hold pledges that addresses impact climate change, displaces and enhances resilient refugees and displacement. The co-leadership of a climate action and pledges will contribute dismissal information and reaches vulnerable, especially women and girls. We are engaged that women takes roles in decision making. In our 5-6 pledges, one of them is a woman and to take the lead on refugees and displaced. The development, also what we worked on as a government is a legal framework. IDP law. Somalia became the second in Africa to pass the IDP law that protects women and children and those who are in the refugee IDP camps. Somalia has open policy where refugees, they come in and do their work and do take experience. Some of the refugees that we hold are doing what's called experience work in the country. The government of Somalia has created a climate action policy, NDB National Development Plan, NDS National Durable Solution. We are standing with Nairobi Declaration and Kampala Accord. All those are laws that the Somali government is really working on. Our second pledges is information decision making for all community, that all stakeholders has to be a part of the solution, because this is the world issues. The third one is ensuring the full participation, empowering, again, refugees. We want refugees and IDPs to take the role. We're supporting integration and peace building. As you all know, Somalia is dealing with not only climate, but also we're dealing with Al-Shabaabs. There's an area that now captured, and we are revising, turning it into the where a peace. We wanted locals to take a peace, mostly the rural areas. We're strengthening disaster reduction and disaster prevention and environmental friendly plan. Our sixth pledge is a risk reduction, where integration and displacement policy are implemented. I want to thank everyone here today for being support, but I would like to leave you a message. Those that you saw on the TV are the ones that's really waiting us. When we leave for water, and before they turn out to next quarter, it's going to be a dry season. And we wanted all these promises that are made today to be really implemented emergency, because there's no time to wait. We all need to act to support, so we see this crisis. It's not a crisis of one corner, and it's not a crisis that Somalia or anyone can do alone. We have to unite it for the benefit of the world crisis. If this has not been implemented early enough, then they will carry until the turn out to when someone in a crisis, like climate crisis or conflict crisis, they will choose a bad choices where they will do a crime and things that you don't want it. Or they will move the country and go to cross the oceans to the lands of Europe and West. So to keep the people to stay in their countries, we want to empower them and teach them how to be friend with the environment, how we can help them. As a Somalia, I will repeat, we contribute the least, but we suffer the most, and it become a norm where we continue getting rain, kills, floods, as you all watch the TV here, and the dry season approaching now with low help at all, nothing prepped at all, and soon you will watch another clip where all the animals, all humans, all the sources they have is gone again. Then another season comes. We need really a different approach than the way things are, and really need to act. And I really want to appreciate all the partners who's really standing 24/7, sparing change. But we wanted the message that you send it and the resources you send it out to has to be discussed with the people on the ground, the people really dealing with the problem, the refugees. We are not holding IDPs, 3 million IDPs, but also we are hosting it. Over 35 to 37,000 refugees from other neighbors. I as a commissioner, I have 100,000 Yemenis, Somalis who's in Yemen, want to return in Somalia. There's Somalis in abroad who want to come back, but they can't because the country is not giving it. So this crisis is a crisis for all. I'm not only looking for Somalia, but broader out of Africa, and neighboring, and also the rest of the world that are climate affected. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your words and for your conclusion. Now we'll move to the next panel. We're running a little bit late, but we'll move to the next panel. Thank you very much to all our panelists. So we'll start our second panel, and again, thank you very much to the first panelist. I'll start my first question with you, Susan. Steering Committee member, Africa Refugee-Led Network. Could you tell us about your role as a steering committee member of the Africa Refugee-Led Network and how you're working with partners to promote the meaningful participation of refugees and other forcibly displaced people in decision and policy-making processes towards more inclusive climate action? And more specifically, how can women and girls be empowered to participate in climate action in displacement setting? You have the floor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think before I go into answering the question, I would like to give a brief introduction of what African Refugee-led Network is. We formed this network in 2019 during the first Global Refugee-led Network Summit in Addis Ababa. And our main aim to form this organization was to advocate for the meaningful participation of refugees. We formed this organization basically as an African chapter, where we would have our refugee-led organization in Africa reporting to having a chapter where they can have their issues addressed instead of before coming to the global aspect. So, how we work with our partners and my role as a steering committee member, majorly I do advocating for the meaningful participation of African Refugee Network. And we came up with a slogan that, actually we are the one who came up with the slogan that says, nothing about us without us. This is the slogan we carry along wherever we go to advocate for our meaningful participation and free movement, not leaving it aside. So we have our partners who really help us, and how we work with them, they help us in forming communication strategies on how we can communicate with our partners, where our voices can be heard. For example, Oxfam, Independence Diplomat, Hilton Foundation, and a few, not the least. So how we look at climate change in our aspect is that we have RLOs, these are refugee-led organizations especially. We have one, for example, in South Sudan under the name of Youth Association for Peace and Development. And this RLON has come up with a project where they want to give back to the community, since the community says that the refugees come and take their land. So they have come up with a project of giving back to the community by building 10,000 trees by the end of the next coming 2 years. And in this, we came up with this project after attending the African Climate Summit in Nairobi. And after we went back home, we sat and we thought of a way on how to give back to the community. And this was the best way we came up with of giving back to the community, planting trees in each refugee camp, not only in South Sudan, but also in the African globe, where we can give out. Majorly, these are the clips we've seen here on the video. Really, these are refugee camps, and it's so devastating when you there's a clip we did not see a lady sitting in water. Her house is in water. Her crops were really soaking up, and she lost hope. She didn't know where to go. Where is she going to go? And usually, women being the ones who take care of homes. These are the women that take care of the homes. And usually, how we want to bring them on board is just creating awareness, giving them education, empowering them to do craft work so they can be able to survive when these climates hit hard, instead of dwelling on one economic activity. So majorly, women and children, and we also want to find a way of how we can reconcile them with their families after they fled to different homes. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you very, very much, Susan. I think your key point, your key slogan, nothing about us without us, is an essential one, and very good to hear from you the specific actions that are being taken in various parts of the world, in various refugee camps in Africa, which are affected by climate change. I'll move now to Commissioner Lenarčič, European Commissioner for Crisis Management. Commissioner, we spoke earlier about the importance of partnerships and the need for joint responses on climate action in displacement setting. What kinds of partnership do you see as key in this context, and how is the EU fostering such a partnership? And if you can also tell us more about the EU plans to respond to this global challenge of disaster and climate related displacement. Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you and fellow panelists on this very important issue. What partnership is necessary? There is one partnership that is necessary above all others when we are trying to deal with the climate impact in fragile and humanitarian settings. And this is the partnership between humanitarian, development, climate, and peace actors. This is the partnership we need to strengthen. Why? Because, as it is known, last year alone, for instance, more than half of the displacement, than half of the people who were displaced because of the impact of the climate crisis. And once people are displaced, you can be sure that humanitarian organizations will be there, both local as well as international, they will be there. But that is not enough. It's not enough. Susan spoke about the situation in a camp. These people don't want to stay in the camp. They don't want to depend on humanitarian aid forever. They want to regain their livelihoods. And that's why we need development partners alongside humanitarian workers who need to be there. Of course, humanitarian workers need to be there in order to alleviate suffering, to provide for survival, and so on. But we need our development partners next to us. And I was encouraged to hear from the World Bank at the previous panel how the World Bank is increasing its funding in fragile settings. That's what we need. And we also need to get into this scheme our climate funding. There was a good event on the 3rd of December in the framework of the COP28, the first ever thematic day devoted to relief, recovery, and peace, which talked exactly about the need to channel more climate funding into the most fragile, most vulnerable settings. And here, I'm really pleased to have Secretary General of IFRC on our panel too, because IFRC recently published a very interesting study. Here in the red, you have 30 most vulnerable countries, and here in blue, you have 30 countries that get most of the climate adaptation funding. In other words, none of the 30 most vulnerable, most fragile countries is among the 30 countries that get most climate adaptation funding. Something should be fixed here, and that's why I think this panel is so important, and that's why I take this opportunity to launch an appeal that there has to be more climate adaptation funding, more climate action in the most fragile, most vulnerable, especially conflict-affected settings. What do we do with this climate funding? We should build resilience at the community level. We should help people find livelihoods that would make them more resilient, more resistant to the climate crisis impact. This is something that needs to be done on a much greater scale. And I come now to the second part of your question, moderator. European Union is increasing its funding. Funding is necessary, of course, and we have devoted last year over 700 million euros for disaster risk reduction and early warning systems, for instance. Funding is one thing, it's not enough. We also need to raise awareness and do the policy making. And for that reason, for instance, the European Union was very pleased to chair the platform on disaster displacement, which just last week adopted its new strategy until 2030. And we are now glad to hand this over to our colleagues from Kenya today, who will take over this work in the future. This is very important because we need to have this kind of platforms to bring all the relevant players together. And finally, we have to mainstream, and we do mainstream our disaster preparedness programs also in all humanitarian action. This is important because we need to be able to address the climate aspect before the crisis as well as after the disaster strikes, and the goal should be to reduce the humanitarian needs, to reduce humanitarian impact of the climate crisis, which is already with us. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Commissioner, for your points. And that's definitely a theme. The need to reach self-reliance, to reduce dependency is a theme that has definitely run through all the conversations that we've had during this forum. And when it comes to climate, it's clear that it is the same thing. As you said, people do not want to find themselves in camps in situations such as this. They want normalcy, and we have to make sure that we invest for that to happen. Thank you very much for your points. I'll now give the floor to Ambassador Gamal Hassan. He was the head of the IGAD Center of Excellence for Climate Adaptation and Environmental Protection. Ambassador, if you can describe how regional approaches in IGAD can support the strengthened inclusion of refugees over other forcibly displaced population and hosting communities in transboundary climate action efforts. And second part of the question, what is still needed in terms of multi-stakeholder collaboration and support to scale up these efforts and to successfully implement the recently endorsed IGAD regional adaptation strategy? Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Raouf. I'm very pleased to be here with this distinguished panel. Thank you very much. I think it's very clear. We are all on the same page. I'm glad we're talking about climate adaptation. So overall, climate change, as you all know, is a threat multiplier. It exacerbates the fragile situations that two of our member states, Ethiopia and Somalia, just talked about. So it threatens both human security and development. So if you don't have development and prosperity, then there can be no peace. So when disasters strike, the most impacted are the most vulnerable. Refugees, IDPs, youth, women groups, girls, people with disabilities, stateless persons, so on and so forth. So we, in IGAD, we have experienced this, and now as we speak, El Nino is taking place in the region, millions displaced, over 100 people died, and we see this constantly. We see droughts, floods, locust infestation, and then again and again. And we have the member states, 8 member states, they all have the NAPs, the NDCs, and since climate is a transboundary nature, we said we need to come together and come up with a regional solution. So that's how, and that's why we created or put together the regional climate adaptation strategy, which was launched at the COP. I think you were there, Commissioner, when our executive secretary launched the regional adaptation strategy, the first of its kind from Africa. So when disasters happen in IGAD, before the adaptation strategy, we had protocols in place. We had the free movement of people protocol. We have the transhumance policy, which acknowledged the climate action. And we have the Kampala Declaration, we have the Nairobi Declaration, and so on and so forth. So IGAD, despite the challenges, we have policies in place, and I think it is doing much better than other regions when it comes to protection and providing the legal framework for refugees and IDPs. So coming to talking about the adaptation strategy from 2023 to 2030 of IGAD, it incorporates critical issues such as human mobility and loss and damage. And since we are close partners of the UNHCR, we made sure that refugees, IDPs, and stateless persons are mentioned and included in the strategy. And when we were doing the strategy, we had a very wide consultations with member states. We went to the countries, we made sure that we looked at the NAPs, we looked at the NDCs, and we used the strategy to fill the gaps and find synergies. So when we were launching the strategy at COP, we realized that that was the time when the loss and damage was also launched. But we didn't wait for COP. We started the process of the loss and damage way, way before. And we were fortunate and pleased to launch our first loss and damage policy brief at COP as well, which I just shared a copy with Raouf. And the second part of your question, IGAD, as you all know, is one of the most highest concentration of displaced persons. 4.5 million refugees and asylum seekers, 12.8 internal displaced people, all as a result of conflict, violence, and climate. So with all these issues, IGAD contributes less than 1% of global greenhouse gas. The whole continent contributes less than 4%. So we're paying the price disproportionately for something that we have not contributed to. So our position is that those high-emitting countries, the developed countries, must come forth with the necessary climate finance needed to counter these issues. The reason we have the loss and damage is to make sure that we present the data, both economic and non-economic losses. We included the non-economic loss because that's exactly where the displacement comes in. When people are displaced, they lose their heritage, they lose their language, they lose their identity, they lose their well-being. So we have to incorporate that non-economic loss and damage into loss and damage discussions. I will come back to the rest, but our pledge is to make sure that whatever we're taking or doing, we must have refugees and IDPs the front and center in all our climate action discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gamal, and it's clear that, as you said, if there is one area where regional approaches are essential, it's in climate action. I'll give the floor now to Jagan, the Chief Executive Officer and Secretary General of the IFRC. How is IFRC supporting displaced people and people at risk of displacement in the context of mounting climate impacts? And what are some of the concrete examples of regional programs and approaches that have demonstrated success through the inclusion of refugees and other displaced communities? Jagan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Raf. Very long question. So, no, first of all, thank you so much, and thank you for having us here. Really great to be with you. Those of you who do not know the IFRC, we are a membership organization in 191 countries, the local Red Cross and Red Crescent societies. I see some of the colleagues here in the room. And the foundation of those national Red Cross and Red Crescent societies are the volunteers in the communities. There are close to 17 million volunteers in the communities. And I wanted to give this context to demonstrate how we actually work at the community level. Basically, our approach when it comes to displacement, but not only displacement, this is our general approach, is what can we do before, what can we do during, and what can we do after an event, and including that of a displacement. I think in many situations, as you know, the whole anticipatory action aspect can be replicated now, not only in a climate-related disasters, but in many other situations now, with the analysis and the trend, if you look at it, you can actually anticipate what can happen before something happens. And then, of course, once things happens, in some way, it's easier to develop the plans and approach. So action before displacement, including people's choice to adapt. And that's extremely important because a lot of time, especially non-climate related, non-conflict related displacement, we have to give opportunity for people choice to adapt. Do they want to move to a certain place or not to a certain place? And I think making those choices available becomes extremely, extremely important. Then, of course, once this has happened, there are the humanitarian needs, and of course, number of things articulated, especially the non-economic aspects you highlighted. I think these are absolutely important elements of response. And then finally, of course, also contributing to finding a sustainable solution, because constant response, I think Commissioner Lenartis, you highlighted, constant response is not a sustainable solution. Of course, it helps save lives, it helps reduce the suffering, and it allows the time for others or the development actors to come and take it forward. But that's really not the solution without a longer-term approach. Now, for internally, what we have really tried to focus on this is, and maybe let me talk, I will build on what Commissioner Lenartis already said. I mean, it's really good now that in last decade or so, there is a huge emphasis on investing on fragile context and fragile settings. And I absolutely agree that that should be a top priority. But what I worry is that we are not paying sufficient attention on a pre-fragile situation, if that's an English word. So where we are now is we are constantly responding when the fragility already comes. And that means the resources that could be invested on development and preventing the future fragility are getting less and less because we are diverting those resources to respond to the fragility once already the fragile contexts have developed. And people are already in that situation. So I think we need to have a serious discussion here that because we don't have all the resources we need, that where we put the emphasis. Of course, in an immediate situation, we have to invest. We have to save lives when people are in that situation. But I really call upon all the donor governments here, the World Bank here, that let's take more seriously on investment, on resilience building, and investing on pre-fragility situation so that we actually prevent the fragility from happening. I was meeting somebody from Mali, and this person opened my eyes. All the attention is in the fragile part of the country, and no attention in the rest of the country, which could move to fragility very quick. So this is really a point I want to make very strongly here today, that let's focus on reducing the fragility by investing in resilience. On the example, we just launched a multi-organization partnership, what we call Water at the Heart of Climate Action. It's a very comprehensive program done with the partnership focusing on 4 countries, going for a few years so that it actually makes a real change on the ground, because a lot of times we spread money too thin and it doesn't make an impact. So we call it sandbag to satellite, where you use the community capacity with the technology that is available globally to make a real difference. And hopefully it prevents the displacement and fragility if we invest on building resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jagan. As you said, before, during, and after anticipatory action and resilience, I think these are the key points of your intervention. We're running very late. I see my colleague worrying about his intervention, but I'll give the floor quickly to Mr. Yero Balde, Director of the Transition State Coordination Office in the African Development Bank, for a 3-minute statement, and then I'll give the floor to Andrew.
Oh, thank you, Rauf. Thank you, UNHCR, for organizing this side event, which is very pertinent for us because climate change is the single biggest threat to development in Africa. The African Development Bank has launched several flagship initiatives to help African countries to address the rising challenges of climate change. These initiatives are geared towards ensuring that Africa grow and build our prosperity along a decarbonized, climate-friendly, environmentally friendly, and socially inclusive path. These initiatives received significant support at the just-ended COP28, garnering global partnerships which are consistent with the bank's commitment to the HDP nexus. To this end, the bank endorsed the COP28 Declaration on Climate Relief, Recovery, and Peace, which was formally launched with a focus on climate finance for highly vulnerable and fragile settings, along with an initial package of financing, programming, and partnership solutions. The bank has already been active on this agenda. For example, just to name a few in the interest of time, the Desert to Power Initiative, which seeks to boost sustainable socioeconomic development of 11 Sahelian countries by generating 10 gigawatts of additional solar generation capacity and electricity access to 250 million people by 2030. The rollout of this initiative has already started in the Sahel, including displacement settings. The Climate Action Window, which aims to raise at least $4 billion to support climate change adaptation and mitigation in Africa's low-income countries, including fragile and conflict-affected countries. Already $429 million has been mobilized towards this endeavor. Our Drought Resilience and Sustainable Livelihoods Program in the Horn of Africa, in collaboration with IGAD, has successfully mitigated the effects of recurring droughts across 6 countries. The program enhanced livelihoods and infrastructure, and it is also well aligned with IGAD's Drought Disaster Resilience Sustainability Initiative. But as we saw in the video earlier, there is a lot more that needs to be done in the Horn of Africa. The bank is also collaborating with the Global Center for Adaptation to amplify Youth Adapt, to propel climate financing for youth-led businesses. From our estimates, low-income countries in Africa alone need annually $60 billion to respond adequately to climate change over the 2020-2030 period. Currently, the annual climate change finance flows to low-income countries, including fragile and conflict-affected countries, stand at only $30 billion, of which only 39% goes towards adaptation. Certainly, more resources are needed for climate action in Africa. The bank, under the leadership of President Adesina, will continue to amplify Africa's voice in drawing the world's attention to the urgent need for critical resources to implement the continent's climate action agenda, including in displacement settings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yerobalde. I'll now thank the panel and let them go back to the chair. Suzanne Louak, Steering Committee Member, Africa Refugee-Led Network, Commissioner Lenartich, in charge of crisis management, European Union, Ambassador Gamal Hassan, the head of the IGAD Center of Excellence for Climate Adaptation and Environmental Protection, and Mr. Jagan Chapagan, Chief Executive Officer and Secretary General of the IFRC. Thank you very much for your interventions. I'll now give the floor to my colleague, Andrew Harper, who is a Special Advisor on climate action. He will facilitate the multi-stakeholder interventions and pledge announcement from the floor. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ralph. And we're obviously running a little bit late, so apologies for that. But this is also just as important, if not more important, because we're going to be looking at pledges from the floor, from our partners, big and small, in order to how do we move forward on the operationalization. There's been a lot of discussions over the last 2 weeks, going from COP now to the GRF, but this is the opportunity to actually add meat to the intentions and the narrative. So we'll go through relatively quickly in terms of the pledges. Should not exceed 2 minutes, and apologies for that, but we're going to have to be pretty tight on this point. So there's a list here. On top of the list, we'll also have the Minister from Uganda making a quick presentation. But firstly, if Your Excellency would mind, if you'd like to come up to the podium first, and make just a 2-minute intervention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Beatrice Atimanywa, I'm State Minister for Environment in Uganda. I want to thank the panelists which we had today, and I've been listening very carefully. Uganda is a country which with the highest number of refugees in Africa and fourth in the whole world. We have an open door policy where we said no to our brothers and sisters who ran away from conflict to go into conflict, from fire to fire, from water into water. So it is an open policy, and we thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda. We wanted to let you know that we appreciate the partners who are intervening, who are partnering with us along the way. Because of our open policy, we share almost everything, our education system, our health system, with our refugees. And I was really comforted even to know that some of our own refugees have even stayed more than 20 years in our country and have found a home away from home. However, we want to appeal that we need a homemade solution. The interventions should be homemade, and it should be really refugee-tailored interventions so that they get the benefit of it. There are so many conditionalities attached to so much of the help that is given. But we must always take in mind that when disasters fall, it has no conditions. When the landslides come and the floods, it has no conditions. You and me, we have to run. So when we are intervening, let's have limited conditions attached to the interventions so that the ordinary refugee and the host community benefit from all these interventions. We want alternative use of energy to be put in place because the environment is really being heavily degraded because of demand for food and firewood and water sources. We thank those who are intervening with clean energy for cooking stoves. I have seen the Soloco group also here and others who are also intervening in Uganda. Lastly, I want to appeal that in Uganda we had a Kampala declaration, which my colleagues had ably talked about, where ministers of environment, the whole of Africa, have come to embrace. And this one was just to let the world know that displacement is no longer only tailored to political instability. Climate change has become the biggest source of displacement, and it must be factored in. And the Kampala Declaration was launched in COP28 last week with my Prime Minister. We want to appeal that it is embraced and supported, as well as my country of Uganda, which is doing so much to have a home away from our refugees. We don't put them in camps, we put them in settlements. For God and my country, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Because it has been very much Africa focused, so it's good to have a representative from Central America. I'd like to ask the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Government of Guatemala, Mr. Giovanni Castillo, to come to the podium, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is a reality that is transforming lives and has exacerbated the challenges faced by populations, driving the displacement of human beings, which is why it is necessary to take measures to reduce irregular migration and guarantee the human rights to migrate. In the case of Guatemala specifically, climate vulnerability derives from its geographical position. Guatemala is located between two oceans in the path of hurricanes and tropical storms, being subject to the presence of extreme events such as floods, droughts, and extreme temperature variations that can cause the loss of livelihoods and environmental services, which are key to sustainable development. For our country, it is essential to protect migrants and guarantee their fundamental rights throughout the migratory cycle. This represents an opportunity to visibly present the efforts made by Guatemalan collaborations with international organizations who are key contributors for the development of initiatives focused on institutional strengthening. To continue to increase actions to improve the situation of migrants and their families, as well as promoting safe, regulated, and optional migration, and as a result of the importance of increasing and strengthening national, regional, and international actions to address the challenges of migrations, Guatemala formed the Working Group on Climate Change and Human Mobility. This group will help coordinate efforts to address the issue and integrate joint initiatives of government agencies, the international corporations, and academia. It is also important to highlight that alienated with the objectives of the Global Compact of Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, the design of adaptation and resilience to climate change are fundamental for the well-being of people as well as the promotion of sustainable results. We have seen progress in creating these commitments, but it is time to implement tangible actions. We must increase efforts and investments to reduce the vulnerability of populations during the migration cycle, improve adaptation and mitigation strategies, including building the resilience of affected communities, whose require opportunities and livelihoods to guarantee their well-being and that of their families through continuous collaboration and the exchange of good practices. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I would now like to invite to the podium Mr. Crimeldo Abaru, the Director General of the National Institute for Refugee Support from the Government of Mozambique.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The Republic of Mozambique has been repeatedly affected by climate shocks, such as cyclones and floods. We had the Cyclone Idai and Kenneth in 2019, Cyclone Gwambe in 2020, Gombe in 2022, and most recently the Cyclone Freddy early this year in February. Bringing devastation, suffering, losses of lives, producing lasting impacts in different areas such as agriculture and infrastructure. And it also affects the availability of basic services such as health, education, water, sanitation. Everything is affected. Actions are needed immediately to address the climate crisis on a global level, on a country level, on a local level, and even on an individual level. We all must do something. We must come together as one to prevent, to respond, and to adapt to climate shocks. Just like the commissioner from Somalia said, there is no time to wait. Addressing these challenges, the government of Mozambique has developed a program for one district and one weather center with early warning systems for the communities in order to prevent, to reduce the impacts of extreme weather events. We have been working with United Nations agencies, including UNHCR, in resettlement centers for IDPs, refugees settlements, and also with the local communities to ensure a community development approach to disaster risk reduction in affected areas. Notwithstanding, we recognize that there is still a long way to go in order to have the country strengthen its institutional capacity to address future challenges of climate change. That's why at this GRF, we pledged to promote a people-centered approach to prepare, respond, and recover from climate shocks and other drivers of forced displacement. And to this endeavor, we should all work together, donor countries, financial institutions, government, civil society, local communities, organizations, on a basis of burden and responsibility sharing as laid down by the Global Compact of Refugees, and address climate changes centered on community development. I thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask to the podium Ms. Diana Dalton, the Deputy Director for Gender Inequalities from FCDO.
Thanks very much. So it goes without saying, given that I'm standing here right now, that the UK fully supports this multi-stakeholder pledge. As we've heard today, populations are displaced by the climate crisis, and then on moving to safety, they find themselves still very much on the front line, the most disproportionately impacted, but yet wholly inadequately supported. We know that bigger, faster steps to build resilience and self-reliance are needed, but also steps to create opportunities for the future, not just survival, must be taken. Risks are only set to increase further in the future, so waiting just isn't an option. The UK launched a government white paper just a few short weeks ago, and it's called Tackling Poverty and Climate Change in a Contested World. And one of the many priorities set out in that pretty comprehensive paper that's setting our direction through to at least 2030, hopefully beyond, is for the UK to invest more effort and more resources in the anticipation and prevention of climate disasters and humanitarian crises. So in line with this, and with our signing of the COP28 Declaration on Climate Relief, Recovery and Peace, the UK therefore pledges here today to prioritise and support action to build the resilience and manage climate impacts in highly vulnerable countries and communities, including among displaced populations and their host communities. So this includes through mechanisms to tackle the task force, including the task force on access to climate finance. And we will do what we can to support national governments, civil society organisations and local communities to increase access to and harness high quality climate finance to support effective evidence-based action on climate adaptation and resilience. We recognise absolutely the need to reach down to local actors, including refugee-led organisations, with finance, with capacity building, and also to do what we can to better facilitate their voices to be heard. We will also support efforts to strengthen local and national capacity for development for early warning systems that provide timely and accurate information to communities on climate-related risks in fragile and conflict-affected areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Mr. Melvin Sharoom, the Chief Underwriting Officer for the African Risk Capacity.
We pledge to provide customized, scalable, and adaptable products that address the needs of vulnerable, displaced, and stateless people living in climate-exposed, fragile, and conflict-affected settings on the continent. These products will be made available to more African member states, more humanitarian and development organizations, more UN agencies, more NGOs, and more cities and local authorities to assist them to better plan, prepare, and respond to climate events in order to protect the lives, livelihoods, and dignity of affected people through a mosaic of anticipatory action and other mitigation financing tools. African Risk Capacity will expand existing partnerships with partners and donor countries to provide more premium funding for the use of pre-arranged financing, which is critical to scaling up accessible funding for climate action. Through context-specific, customized contingency plans, the pre-arranged financing linked to anticipatory action products, contingency funds, and parametric insurance will be deployed faster and efficiently, providing a unique market-based solution that is underpinned by a pre-approved response plan. Through the Replica program, UN agencies, humanitarian and development organizations, and NGOs are able to purchase insurance policies for the benefit of climate-vulnerable populations on the continent. An example of this unique approach is the recent partnership between UNHCR and African Risk Capacity, which facilitated the purchase of a parametric drought policy by UNHCR in the central region of Malawi to protect the marginalized and vulnerable displaced people. This is a pilot program for which the premium was generously funded by the German government. We pledge to expand this program to other countries to scale up the coverage and reduce the protection gap. Thank you.
Excellent, Mel. Now I would like to ask Ms. Aji Veres, the Director of Geneva Office of UNDP. Oh, okay, sorry. Kate Osborne.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Andrew, and apologies, Aggie can't be here. She was called away. So, fostering green transition policies and delivering on adaptation commitments can help address climate change, environmental pressures that lead to forced displacement. Minimizing the risks of people being forced to move must be integrated into climate change policies, including NAPs and NDCs, which is obviously a focus of this pledge, and we've seen many panelists bring it up today. At UNDP, we are already working in 120 countries to turn their climate action ambitions into concrete action, to take bold action to reduce their emissions, increase their resilience to climate impacts as key engines of sustainable development. Towards this pledge, UNDP is committing to stepping up our ongoing work on the inclusion of forced displacement into NAPS in line with the UNFCCC Task Force on Displacement and their key new guidance, and building upon our work in over 50 countries in these processes. UNDP is already on the ground in terms of our work in terms of our climate work and support to governments, including one of the largest receivers of vertical funds implemented in many displacement contexts. Looking ahead, UNDP will be reviewing our portfolio on climate change adaptation, and we look forward to being able to share good practice on key learning to strengthen the linkages between UNDP's climate action initiatives and creating strengthened linkages to our work on human mobility. We are also, as always, very much committed to working with all partners, governments and others. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Kate. I'd now like to invite Mr. Boubacar Jawa, member of the Yungo Migration and Climate Change Working Group of the UNFCCC.
Thank you so much. I stand before you today as a representative of Yungo Climate Change and Migration Working Group. We hereby affirm our commitments to the Global Refugee Forum and its multi-stakeholder pledge on climate action. We are dedicated to aligning our efforts with the objectives outlined in the Global Compact on Refugees, which recognizes that external force displacement may result from sudden onset disasters and environmental degradation, and that while not in themselves causes of refugee movements, climate, environmental degradation, and disasters increasingly interact with the drivers of refugee movements. We commit to advocate for guidance and support to manage protection and humanitarian challenges for persons displaced in search, as well as host communities. As advocates, as youth advocates, our mission is very clear. First, that is to raise awareness and promote climate literacy through capacity building and educational programs. We aim to highlight the complex intersections of climate change, migration, protected displacement, focusing on protection challenges faced by vulnerable populations, including refugees and those on the front lines of climate emergency. Beyond awareness, our commitment extends to advocacy for policy changes, locally led durable solutions, the resource mobilization for refugees, the host community and host community-led initiatives. We emphasize the inclusion of refugees, migrants, internally displaced persons, and host communities in decision-making processes with a special emphasis on the voices of children, youth, including indigenous youth, women, and persons with disabilities. To empower affected communities, foster climate resilience, and facilitate active participation, we plan to engage in capacity-building initiatives, intergenerational dialogue, and consultations. Collaboration is at the core of our strategy, and we commit to working closely with diverse stakeholders, including international organizations, refugee-led organizations, refugees' countries of origin, and host countries as well, in promoting equitable and burden sharing, at local, regional, and national level. And by amplifying the voices of refugees, particularly children and youth, in climate vulnerable, fragile, and conflict-affected settings, we strive to ensure safety, dignity, access to fundamental rights for refugees to local and global levels. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to shaping a more inclusive and resilient future for refugees and displaced communities worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mr. Julian Shoup from the Vice President of Humanitarian Policy and Practice from Interaction.
Good morning, everyone. I'll try to be extremely brief. I know that everyone is looking forward to lunch. So first of all, I mean, Interaction is the largest US-based network of NGOs, and our 170 members work really at the forefront of the climate crisis on a daily basis. We see ourselves as a strong voice representing the sector, and climate work, climate adaptation is one of our strategic priorities. So linked to that, I'm pleased to announce today Interaction's cross-cutting pledge under the Climate Action umbrella. So what we commit to is over the next 4 years, Interaction will use its platform to support, one, the inclusion of displaced people in climate adaptation national plans, laws, and policies, and we've seen through the panels that's a priority of everyone engaged in this discussion and in this action. We will also push for climate finance to really reach the most vulnerable communities and promote an improved understanding of human settlements, housing, land, and property rights within the sector. And we commit to disseminating all the best practices that we intend to collect from our members. So we look really forward to working with all of you and to engage in this multi-stakeholder pledge. How did I do on time?
You did. I love you. Thanks, Julian. Mark, up and quick. Mark Gibson from the GPA UNITAR. Is Mark here? Okay. Mark. Joel, you've got 1 minute then.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much. It's my privilege to take this opportunity on behalf of the GPA to present our pledge, which focuses on making sure that we support the humanitarian sector, ensuring that displaced affected communities and host communities around the world have access to sustainable, affordable, and reliable and modern energy. And in accordance to that, we'll make sure that we lead in the planning and coordination of efforts, by ensuring that, also making sure that we enable innovation and financing effort that different partners are really working on, but also build technical experience and capacity on climate and energy issue in displaced settings. And on the same note, I'll also add that we are so happy to have taken the opportunity yesterday to launch the Solco partnership, which emphasizes on electrical cooking in displacement settings, which is also making sure that we leverage finance to ensure that 1.2 million displaced people have access to clean cooking transitioning method in displacement settings. Thank you so much.
Perfect, Joel. Thank you very much. Professor Hiram Angel, the IDRC Research Chair in Forced Displacement, Inclusion and Human Rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I am speaking on behalf of network of 12 IDRC, International Development Research Center, research chairs on forced displacement. The network is a community of 12 scholars based at universities in countries experiencing mass displacement. Together, we aim to reframe the narrative of forced displacement and transform the field of forced migration study to mainstream global south perspective using evidence-based research and analysis. In October, the Morocco chair at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University with other IDRC chairs organizes the Global South Summit on Climate Displacement in Rabat, Morocco. The network would like to make the following call to this audience. 1. Ensure the response to climate and environmental displacement are localized, situational, and context-specific. 2. Encourage the comprehensive comprehensive holistic management of environmental displacement policies, including the governance of natural resources, disaster response, migration, and forced displacement. 3, integrate local perspectives, refugees, host communities, migrants, displaced, and stateless persons at every level and stage of national adaptation and mitigation policy making. 4, center the colonial and indigenous knowledge and practices in climate displacement and environmental policy and place indigenous expertise at the forefront of climate solutions. 5, integrate consideration of race, gender, and diverse identity intersection with climate change and displacement. 6, foster a positive narrative around climate displaced person and host community. 7, promote collaboration and mechanisms for partnership among states, actors, civil society, private sector, and impacted individuals. 8, capitalize on regional integration mechanisms to encourage relational solutions. 9, promote Sud-Sud platform on climate displacement at national, regional, and global levels for learning, coordination, and best practice. 10, ensure that research data and statistics of nexus between climate and displacement are publicly available and incorporate climate change impact analysis in all research and publications. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. 10. Catherine Lynn. We're pushing through, and I'm going to get in trouble here. But some of the last ones are also some of our best partners. So they're all best, but this is some are better than us.
Thank you, Andrew. I will not be able to do 10 points in 2 minutes. So the ICRC wants to welcome the work that you've been doing to pull us all together around strengthening climate action for displaced communities and for communities undergoing fragility and conflict. This is important work, and we are seeing a shift in the discourse, which is important. We are increasingly recognizing the urgency of doing more for these communities. Across the world, the ICRC sees, witnesses the very dramatic impact that climate change is having on conflict and violence-affected communities. I want to stress 2 points here in terms of what we are committing to do. As a humanitarian organization, we are committed to doing our part in adapting our response to help communities cope with growing risks. In collaboration with communities that are enduring conflict and violence, authorities, and other partners, including UNHCR, we're working to ensure that our programs help people cope with growing climate risks. Our recent report, Weathering the Storm, highlights efforts to help strengthen the resilience of communities, including displaced people, to climate risks in northern Mozambique, eastern Niger, and the Gaza Strip prior to the current escalation. It shows that it is possible to do better in these environments. We will continue sharing our experience, and we hope that this can feed into a comprehensive response by development, humanitarian, and climate actors. We're also committed to the sector-wide effort to scale up and improve the humanitarian response. Together with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies and the International Council of Voluntary Agencies, we are setting up a secretariat for the Climate and Environment Charter for Humanitarian Organizations, with the support of the US and ECHO. The Resource Hub will ensure good practice, technical knowledge are shared widely across the humanitarian sector. Well beyond the humanitarian sector, scaled up development and climate action in fragile and conflict settings is critical, and we encourage all signatories to take ambitious action now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to have to cut it off after Grazia now, because we've been told to leave. But Grazia, if you'd just like to come up. So while Grazia is talking, or about before she talks, I've just received a note from one of the refugees who's basically saying, he's from South Sudan, and he's saying, I just received news that my paternal uncle drowned in a small river back home. We need to know that climate change is real. And so this is like everything we're talking about is useless unless we can provide better protection for people. So people are actually dying while we're having these meetings. So like, let's try and like when you're having these pledges, when you're having these commitments, it's not just coming up and talking. It's about we need to make sure people are protected. So No pressure now, Grazia.
I don't know what to say after this news, very sad news, so thanks a lot, Andrew, for that, to bring us to the reality. So I represent CGIAR, a research consortium that works to transform land, water, and food systems in a climate crisis, and we hereby pledge to promote climate resilience and sustainable livelihoods in fragile conflict-affected settings and areas where displacement poses development challenges. The demand-driven research will inform partners' efforts to promote food and nutrition security, climate adaptation, effective coping strategy, and we pledge to advance the systematic inclusion of displaced persons along with their host communities in critical areas. Our pledge includes 5 main pillars: anticipatory action and governance. CGR will provide technical and institutional capacity as well as data and knowledge to support agencies such as UNHCR in the development of strategies for effective climate action. Second, bridge conflict and emergency operations. CGR will develop a climate peace and displacement partnership which will provide state-of-the-art science, tools and guidelines to humanitarian and development stakeholders to inform and integrate conflict fragility and protection programming along the HDP nexus. Stabilizing individual and community livelihoods. CGIAR will support governments, UN agencies, NGOs in fragile conflict-affected settings to implement new programming and strengthen gender equality and social inclusion to help improving the livelihoods and food security of displaced and refugee people. Fourth, accelerate stability and peace accelerator partnership, a grant mechanism to support local innovation to design innovations and solutions along the HDP nexus. And finally, the learning and partner decision support to support partners to combat fragility and conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Grazia. And apologies for those that we could not get to at the end. Like in the end, like we've had to stop now. But sincere thanks to everyone for your commitment, for your partnership, your engagement, and we look forward to actually, like, this is a step in a process which is just going to get more important. So again, thanks for your engagement, and over.